We have some events in the world today that call to our attention certain things we have tried to learn and are still trying to learn, and I think it would be well at this moment to review them, particularly in light of the present chapter, which is 17, the study of the world consciousness. We had this event on Friday when the boys from Wichita State, flying over to Salt Lake City or Logan, Utah, had a disaster over the Colorado Rockies. Plane exploded. 13 boys on the football team were killed. The coach, the athletic director. Actually, there were 29 people in a plane who were killed and 11 survived. And if any of us had been parents of those boys, at the moment we'd be in a state of mourning. Now, Wichita State is in the middle of what may be called the Bible Belt. And a very strange thing happens when something like this happens in a family. Faith in God isn't shaken, but instead we tend to turn to God and say, I don't really understand this, but I hope that you're taking care of my boy now, up in heaven. You know, when 6 million Jews were burned in the ovens of Hitler, the Jewish religion didn't look at God and say, well, now, what's wrong with our concept of God? It just goes right on worshiping the same God. The God who did nothing about 6 million people killed. And so it is with all of the religions of our world. We go right on today just as if God is doing the right thing by us, we hope. And it never occurs to us that by challenging our own concept of God, we're not being unfaithful to God. We're removing our insult to God. Now let's look up close at that wreckage in the Colorado Rockies. The plane went through the sky. Now, religion believes that God created the sky. The next logical question would be then, if God created the sky, why doesn't God maintain an orderly route through the sky, protected under divine government by everything that goes through God's sky? And of course there's no possible answer to that from the standpoint of the human mind. And then we say to ourselves, did God know about this wreck before it happened? And we have to say, obviously not, because if God knew about it before it happened, well, certainly God would have alerted everybody and prevented it. And the fact that it wasn't prevented by God would indicate that God didn't know about it before it happened. Well, we'd like to know exactly when God did learn about that wreckage. Was there a moment in which God became aware of it? There was a moment when the engines didn't work. The pilot was aware of it. Was God aware of it yet? Well, God didn't do anything about it at that moment, so we'd have to say, at that moment, the pilot knew about it, but not God. The pilot at that moment knew something God didn't know. He knew his engines weren't working right, but God didn't know that. Then there was some black smoke came out of it. And finally, the plane was not able to continue, and the pilot was diving to the earth. And we want to know if God knew about it at that time. Because certainly if God knew about it at that time, wouldn't God prepare a perfect place for the plane to land? But it seems that God must not have known about it because the plane hit the mountain. And then it burst into flame, then it exploded. Before you knew it, there were 11 survivors walking out, dazed, confused, burned, and there were 29 charred bodies, including 13 members of the Wichita State University football team, of which we might say one of our boys was in that plane, one of our sons. Now let's take that boy, or 13 of them. They were under very rigid football discipline, so you know they weren't degenerates. You know they weren't drinking alcohol. You know they weren't smoking. They were probably drinking milk at night, going to bed early. They were doing what a nice, normal, healthy, wholesome, Bible-loving son would do. But they're not alive. And we still wonder, when did God become aware of that event? The photographers became aware of it. The press became aware of it. The mothers and fathers became aware of it. And has God yet been aware and alerted to the fact that it happened? Now, there's no indication that God knows any of this, or knew any of this as it happened or before it happened. But the world knows about it. Every newspaper in the country knows about it. And there's great mourning and great grief, because we know it happened. But God does not know it happened. The usual questions are, who was responsible? Was it the pilot? Was it the owner of the chartered plane? Was the equipment faulty? Hadn't it been checked properly by the ground crew? Did the pilot know anything about navigation? Was he licensed? So forth. But those are the wrong questions. Those are the questions that have been asked again and again and again after every fatal crash. The question we want to ask is this: how do we know it happened and God doesn't know it happened? How do we know more than God? By what earthly intelligence are we able to know that which God is unable to know? Because there's no evidence that God knows anything about that wreck or the death of 29 people. When you ask that question of yourself, you can begin to see what the message of truth has been trying to tell you for the past, 100 years on this earth. There wasn't anyone in that plane who was aware of the presence of God. And yet all may have been lovers of the Bible, believers in God, ever since they were knee-high to a grasshopper. They may have been weaned on religious beliefs, but those beliefs were powerless. And if there had been a minister or a priest or a rabbi sitting on the plane with them, it would have been of no avail. If all of Kansas had known about it and had prayed, it would have been of no avail. And so the question isn't what went wrong. Was the equipment faulty? The question is, how do we attain oneness with God? For surely our normal human concepts in this world of God are faulty. Not our equipment. Our ignorance of God is the cause of every problem that we face. Now we're told that one with God is a majority, and we're also then to accept the fact that one with God on that plane, conscious of the presence of God, not of a concept called God, but of the living presence of God, would have made it impossible for the crash. Now we could go back to our normal routines. It was just an item in the newspapers to us. But you see, tomorrow, it's our son or our grandson at his college. And it takes off for another game somewhere else. Or tomorrow it's us on a plane traveling somewhere else. And it's also us in an automobile. It's always the question of whether or not we are moving in the world of men, not in the government of God, or moving in the kingdom of God under divine protection. Now suppose you had been able to train one of those boys in the truth. Suppose you had been able to teach him that when you are not conscious of the presence of God, that presence cannot function through your consciousness, and therefore you are unprotected by the very God you worship. Your consciousness is the channel through which God comes into your experience. And when you're not conscious of God, because God is life, when you are not conscious of God, you are unconscious. You are moving in unreality. You are dead to God. And it's only a matter of time before that catches up with you to prove that you've been dead to God. It may not happen in a crash. It just happens normally. We who are dead to God die. Because whatever is in your consciousness must externalize. We who are alive to God live. And so we find that we are here to build a consciousness, not of death, not of mortality, but a consciousness of those qualities which are eternal. Whenever your consciousness contains an awareness of the eternal, that is what you will show forth. You will show forth your consciousness of the eternal as an eternal experience. Or you will show forth your consciousness of mortality as a mortal experience. And just now, coming over the horizon, is the understanding that we are here to build our consciousness of God's presence at all times. Not even 23 hours a day, but 24 must we be aware, without ceasing, that where we are, God is. We were given that in the first commandment. Acknowledge me. Honor the Lord supremely. Acknowledge me with all thine heart, thy soul, and thy mind. And we were given that because the minute you acknowledge the presence of God, that presence acknowledges you. It cannot function through your unconsciousness of its presence. And without it, without our awareness of its presence, we walk separated from it, divided, forced into a separation through ignorance. And the entire world is walking in that separation. Separated from the presence of God by unawareness of that presence, being unconscious to it. And we are privileged through this study to make an adjustment in consciousness which takes away the division, the separation, and brings us into divine government by our unceasing awareness that where I stand, God is now. Never can there be a change in that truth. But your conscious awareness of it is what brings it into active experience. Now, the 17th chapter of John, the Revelation here, is all about the world which is unconscious of the presence of God. And it gives us the reason why we are unconscious of the presence of God. If you look around your world today, you will see that science in the main is atheism. There are those scientists who believe in a God, it's true, but basically the majority of the scientific world believes God has no existence. And so we can't look to science to help us find the presence of God. Then when we look to the religious world, we find it is unconscious of the presence of God while it believes it worships God. And so it cannot demonstrate God. It cannot bring God into experience. It is always praying, seeking God's help to do something. Or it is praying while it is burying a corpse after the death. Religion cannot give us God because it has not found God. It has not got out of the trap of the belief in mortality. Science has not risen out of the trap in the belief in mortality. All around you, the people you love, the people you respect, the people you wish to help, are anchored in the belief that we are mortal beings. And there is no way that you can help them other than demonstrating through your awareness of the presence of God that you are not a mortal being. For your words will not help them. Your promises will not help them. Nothing you do can help them if you leave them in the belief that they are mortal beings. Because you can be sure that the only reason 29 in a plane die is because they believe they are mortal beings. And in doing so, they are separated from the immortal presence, which is the only presence. So we who wish to be a boon to those around us, to express our love, we must go about it a different way than the world has gone about it in the past. We hear about people doing all wonderful things, all kinds of deeds that are fine on the human scene. But they are still leaving those whom they love in the belief that mortality is the nature of man. They are still leaving them subject to two powers, to a divided consciousness which is unprotected against the false powers of the world. Your only way of help, then, is to walk in your immortal self, which walks on earth now in the kingdom of God knowingly, without ceasing. We must drop the belief in mortality, in materiality. This is the new consciousness that is dawning in us. And now in the 17th chapter we find that even though love of the world has been shown by John in his early letters to be the cause of every problem on this earth, even though Jesus taught that matter and mortality were the false beliefs of a human mind, even though this Bible has been in existence since the 5th century, even though it has been printed since the 14th century, even though there are millions of Bibles all over the world, the basic teaching of the Bible is unheeded completely. And that is, God is all, and God is Spirit. Unless there is a consciousness that I am Spirit, I have not caught the message of the Bible. And I can step on a plane tomorrow without divine protection. But let me know that Spirit is my name, wherever I am. And I am under the perfect law of God. To the degree that I do not drop my awareness that Spirit is my name, to that degree do I walk in the kingdom of God on earth. Deny it, voluntarily or involuntarily, knowingly or unknowingly, and you step out of the kingdom of God walking defenseless in the midst of non-existent powers that can actually kill you. Now John sees an angel, one of the angels with the 7 vials. The angel says, "Come hither. I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters." Now the use of this term is to dramatize that the human mind has been seduced from reality. The great whore that sitteth upon many waters. Mortality. The belief in mortality throughout the Old and the New Testament is called a harlot, because through the belief in mortality we are unfaithful to God. God is immortal. And by our belief in immortality we are unfaithful to our own identity. We are deceived. We accept mortality where the only creator is the immortal self, the only life is the immortal life, and we walk in a sense of mortal being. And so we are seduced by the harlot, who invites us to live a mortal life, and we in our ignorance accept. She sitteth upon many waters. And this refers to the many levels of human consciousness which all accept mortality as the reality of life. This is the widespread, accepted, normal belief of man on earth. But John says, no. You've missed the teaching if you believe that. Jesus taught us to be reborn out of the mortal belief into the realization of immortal sonship, which is the permanent state of being in which we have ever been before the foundations of the world, now and forever, hypnotized by the senses. It isn't enough for a mortal being to say, I believe in God. That mortal being must say, because I believe in God, who is the immortal self, the only creator, I also believe that I am not mortal being, but immortal being. I believe that the substance of God is my substance. I believe that God being spirit, I am spirit. I believe that God being perfect, I am perfect. No longer will I insult God by believing that the immortal spirit can create an imperfect mortal being. Yes, I believe in God, but I also believe that I am God's divine image and likeness, which is not mortal, which cannot die, which cannot suffer, which cannot be charred on a mountainside when a plane bursts into flame. My name is I Am, the Spirit of God. And therefore this form you see, which is mortal, cannot be my identity. It must be something else, and I must find out what it is. I must come out from under the belief of centuries that this mortal body is me. For unless I do, I am accepting myself to be something that God did not create. The God that did not save 13 boys on a hillside did not create those 13 boys. Now let's go back to Thunder of Silence. Let's look at something you have studied and see how well you assimilated it. There is no truth in this whole picture because we are living in a spiritual universe where nobody has any need of baggage. You remember, he lost his baggage, but now he learns nobody has need of baggage in a spiritual universe. Whatever there is of reality is incorporeal, spiritual, omnipresent. And whatever appears as finite baggage, in time, in space, must be an image in thought. So now he's telling us that whatever we see as mortal flesh, just as whatever we see of finite baggage, is an image in thought. And we're going to stay with this until we know what that means. It can have no reality to it. And so he concluded, I have been fooled into hoping and waiting for material baggage to turn up in a spiritual universe where every idea is omnipresent. Now this is rather difficult to understand. But the next sentence is not difficult to understand, and it is this. There is no such thing as a material body. There's only a material concept of body. Now here you are, and your son has just been killed on a Colorado mountainside, and you're being told there is only a material concept of body. It doesn't sit very well with you. Nevertheless, even though it's sour in the belly, God did not create that which can die. And so we have to change our concept of our son, our concept of our own body, and see the difference between a body and a concept of body. Your body is a temple of the living God. It cannot die on a hillside. Then it cannot be this body. But what is this body? Let us finally understand what this body is. This body is your consciousness made visible. Your consciousness is simply not conscious of your true body. Your consciousness is looking at your true body, your spiritual body, but it cannot receive the fullness of your spiritual body inside its consciousness, because your consciousness is finite. And so outside your consciousness is the fullness of your body, and inside your consciousness is your limited concept of that body. That limited concept inside your consciousness is the body you walk around in. Your physical body is within your consciousness. It is not outside it, it is within it. And if your consciousness could expand and expand and expand to receive a wider, more truer understanding of your spiritual body, that realization would then change your physical form to that extent. Meanwhile, until you can do that, your spiritual form is unrecognized by your consciousness, and your limited awareness of that spiritual form within your consciousness is converted into a concept called physical body. Between your physical body, which is finite and mortal, and your spiritual body, which is infinite and immortal, is that line of your consciousness. And to the capacity that you can receive the truth of your being, to that degree do you manifest this form. Later you will manifest a spiritual form when your consciousness is spiritual. And so we're in the division between spirit and matter because our consciousness is a material consciousness. And that's how we get a material sense of body. We do not have a material body. We have a material sense of body, and the bodies you see are within the consciousness of each individual walking where your eye reports a form. There goes a form, but it is a form in somebody's consciousness which you are accepting as a form. If that individual's consciousness was spirit, that form would not be there that way, but instead a body of light would appear there. Always the converter is the consciousness, and the density of that consciousness makes the density of the form. Your body is formed of a fabric, and that fabric is your consciousness. When your consciousness is a spiritual consciousness, then the fabric of your body will be spirit. When your consciousness is mental, then the fabric of your body is the mental fabric, which appears as matter. Now this is the hypnotism then of mind. And so we see forms, we see baggage, but always God is the only substance, the only presence, and God's presence is spirit, which we are discerning through the density of our consciousness. Now get that. that the bodies you see are not there. They are only in your consciousness. They are images in your thought. What is there is pure spiritual emanation, unseen by and untouched by the limitation of your finite consciousness. And so we're told to develop this consciousness through truth and meditation, to spiritualize it, to refine it, to uplift it, to make it conscious of Christ. There's no such thing as a material body. There's only a material concept of body. And there is no such thing as a material universe. You'll find this all on page 102 and 103 of Thunder of Silence. There is only a material concept of the one spiritual universe. And as long as we accept these material concepts of the spiritual universe, we're under the laws of matter. And so we get in a plane as a material concept called body, and we're under the law of matter. But we could get in a plane in a different way. We could get in a plane knowing that this material concept that you see does not change the fact that only spirit is my name and my substance. And therefore I can now rest in the knowledge that being spirit, I am under the government of the divine consciousness. That the only power in my life is divine consciousness, which governs its own spirit. And now I am opening myself to a new law, a new level. I am not mortal being in a mortal body. I am spiritual being in a divine body, under the law of divine consciousness. And what brings that law into work now? The first commandment. Acknowledge me. Acknowledge me. I am divine consciousness, the Father. That wasn't so difficult to acknowledge me, was it? Now that you've acknowledged me, we are one consciousness. Your consciousness, aware of my consciousness, makes you one with my consciousness. And now the Father and the Son are one. Acknowledge me in all thy ways, without ceasing, with your mind, your soul, your heart. Never stop acknowledging that I, divine consciousness, am the Father of this universe. I am present wherever anyone is. Don't step into an automobile. Step into divine consciousness as you step into an automobile. Don't step into an airplane. Step into divine consciousness. Don't step into bed. Step into divine consciousness. Don't step out of bed. Step out into divine consciousness without ceasing. And that means where you are, acknowledge that God is there. God is divine consciousness. Right here in this room, God is. Divine consciousness is here. And therefore divine consciousness being here is governing here. And your awareness of that enables divine consciousness to come through your awareness. If you're not conscious of something, it's outside your awareness. How can you be aware of it if it's outside your awareness? And so you must consciously be aware. And the minute you do that, you are praying. And that's the only prayer you ever need know. For that is the Lord's Prayer. God is here, now, being God. And all the appearances of the world will testify no, but God is here, being God. It will not change. And the one who is conscious of it is under the law of that presence. It makes no difference what you're suffering from. The moment you know God is where you are, even though your five senses are on fire and denying God, your acceptance of God's presence, even in the face of what your five senses are saying, this is the acknowledgement, and the only acknowledgement that is necessary. God is here. God does not inhabit a place where a virus can exist. Can God be here and a virus? What kind of power has God? Can God be here and a problem? Can God be here and anything but God? The moment you know God is here, you know the opposite. Whatever is not God is not here, because God is all. And this is the consciousness you build day in and day out, until it's automatic, till you don't have to say it. You don't even have to think it. It's your normal consciousness. God is here. Where? The world sees you here, but God is here. Why is God there? Because there's no place where God is not. Well, what about you? If God is there, what about you? If God is there, then God is the substance of all that you are. And all that is not the substance of God is not there, though it appears to be. It is a concept in consciousness. God is not your mortal body, but God is where you are. And when you accept your mortal body as reality, you are denying the presence of God. This is the hurdle that you face. The moment you accept your mortal body as being present, you have imagined a form that is not there. God is there, and God is not your mortal form, and God is all. And therefore, without the capacity to fully understand that, to know that, you still must, on faith, accept it. Because God is here, and God is not this form. God being all, this form cannot be here. Where is it? It's in my consciousness. That's the only place that exists. And as that consciousness becomes Christ consciousness, then I will find and live in, knowingly, the Christ form. Now that's the transition in consciousness we're all going through. The actual denial of the human form, of all material form, the good and the bad. For this is the harlot that seduces us into a false sense of life. This is the harlot that sitteth upon many levels of human consciousness, all accepting the mortal form as themselves, and all dying in that mortal form. We have all passed this, and then we have come to a place where we thought we might have understood it, and then we have ignored it, and then we have returned to it. Always we're hoping in some way that we can live in the best of two worlds, trying to live in the kingdom and also trying to live in the best of this world, clinging to our mortal beliefs. But you find ultimately you cannot live in the best of two worlds, because only one is here. and it is not this one. All that you call a mortal world is in your mortal consciousness. The complete mortal experience is nothing more than the mortal consciousness made visible. And God is divine consciousness, immortal consciousness, the only consciousness. And so the death of the mortal consciousness is the rebirth into the immortal consciousness. All that is contained in the mortal consciousness must be abandoned and is abandoned as the mortal consciousness dies to the Father. As we put on the garment of the immortal consciousness, then it externalizes, and we are no longer walking in bodies of clay. We are walking in the awareness of a spiritual form, even though the world only sees a body of clay. And we are no longer deceived by the harlot who sitteth upon many waters. This is probably the hardest thing there is in the Bible, and yet it's the very core of it. Joel goes on to say, we learn that we begin to understand that we live and move and have our being in the first chapter of Genesis, where man is made in the divine image and likeness of God, of spirit, that the soul of God is the soul of man, the life of God is the life of man, and the mind of God is the mind of man, and the body of God is the body of man. Nothing occupies time or space but our mental images. So whatever your name or nature, if you exist in time or in space, you are a mental image, a nothingness. And these are the facts, and it is not enough to read them or even to understand them. They must be lived with until, it's not Joel's consciousness saying them anymore, but your own. Now this is the consciousness we're all trying to build. The consciousness of the pure, perfect, omnipresent Spirit of God everywhere. Starting with right here, where I stand. And then right there where you stand. And right there where she stands. And right there where everyone else stands. Until in your consciousness, Spirit stands everywhere, in spite of the mental images that appear external to your form. That's the way to freedom. Come hither, said the angel to John, I will show you the judgment of the great whore. Now the judgment means that having accepted mortality as what we are, we accept death. We accept death as a normal thing because mortality accepts things to be dying. And so we accept that we live in dying bodies. We accept that we live in a dying life. We accept that all of the material structures that we know ultimately must die with us. This becomes part of the pattern of our minds. Death is an accepted thing with us. We believe in mortality. And we live out of that belief. We seek to postpone it as long as possible. We're conscious of it. And God never created mortality. and yet we say we worship God. The judgment of mortality is that everything that is born must die. And this is the pattern that is perpetuated. Now, John has much more to say about mortality. With whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. We have invented a whole pattern of powers called the kings of the earth. All of these things have power. Money has power. Position has power. Material possessions have power. Bombs have power. Disease has power. These are the kings of the earth. They have drunk the wine of her fornication. They only have power because we believe in mortality. Mortality being our belief, those things which threaten our lives are accepted as powers. Those kings of the earth which have power over us are the false powers born of the false belief that I walk in a mortal form. My body being mortal, anything that threatens my body is a power over me. Out of the false belief called the fornication come all of the false powers that I must fear and run from and defend against. Powers that only exist because of my primary illusion that I am mortal being. Stand ye still in your immortal self, and behold the salvation of the Lord. There are no kings of the earth over you. There are no false powers. There's nothing threatens your mortality because you have none. Nothing threatens immortality. We are being deceived by the universal belief that mortality is a reality. And so he carried me away in the Spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Now John is lifted higher in spirit into the wilderness, and that means he is lifted out of world thought, world hypnotism. 40 days in the wilderness, out of world hypnotism. And out of world hypnotism he can see the eternal, the immortal realities. He can see what is. And by seeing what is, he automatically knows what is not. There he sees this woman sitting upon a scarlet-covered beast. The harlot, mortality, sits upon a beast. You see, mortality rides on the beast. Mortality rides on the belief in matter. The belief in matter is the beast. Believing in matter, which is mortal, we believe that we are mortal. And so the beast we ride upon is materialism. And from it, we are deluded into the belief that we are mortal matter. Full of names of blasphemy, because every belief we have in our mortal material self is a blasphemy, an untruth about reality. How can mortal matter know God? How can mortal matter be protected by God? or live in the law of God, or walk in the kingdom of God. And so by the very belief that we are mortal matter, we are Adam and Eve stepping outside of Eden. We have succumbed to the wiles of the harlot. And from that moment on, whatever we think or do is blasphemy. For we accept the 7 heads and the 10 horns of the beast, which are the false powers of the beast. The woman was arrayed in purple, scarlet colors. She was decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hands full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. You see, to mortal matter, the woman called mortality is a very desirable thing. She's ravishing to mortal matter. Her raiment is beautiful and enticing. And she has all these precious stones. These represent the false lures of mortal mind. She has a golden goblet. And we reach in for these things. They turn out to be filth and abominations, meaning mortality has nothing to offer except deception. It has fooled the world. Mortality can only offer death. It can only offer an end. It can only offer false promises. And as you reach for them, even in the fulfillment of them, death is still waiting around the corner. Mortality is the lie about God, the supreme lie about God. And yet it has all these entrancing ravishments, so that the world seeks all of these mortal things and devotes its time and its effort, its money. Its complete life is built upon mortal achievements. And this is the content of the golden goblet, forcing us into a state of life which is never real, but always seeming to be. And we live in this unreality, completely entranced by the woman in scarlet and purple, not knowing that she does not exist. We worship a shadow, and we live out of a shadow, seeking more shadows, to accumulate them, to store them in bonds, to build a life of glorious shadows. And behind the shadows, I am, awaiting recognition, ever present, saying, "Look unto me. I am your immortal self, your spiritual body, your perfect divine mind, your eternal life." Are you going to be seduced by shadows, by mortal matter? We are taken now to Jesus. The kingdoms of the world were offered to him. Mortal matter. Even as you and I are being tempted every moment to believe that we live as mortal matter in a mortal universe. And we are now to respond as he did. No, I do not live in a mortal world. God created none. Right here, present, where the mortal world appears, is the perfect, invisible kingdom of my Father. And I am developing that spiritual consciousness which can live and discern and realize that invisible kingdom, that invisible body, that invisible self. I will not be tempted by the kingdoms of the world, for there are none. The harlot on the horse, on the beast, loses its appeal to those who come into the consciousness that God is truly all, truly present, truly now. I am, and beside me there is no other. You are looking at the lie about me called this world, but my kingdom is right there for those who are enlightened, for those who are not clinging to the best of this world, but have managed to be liberated from the blandishments of a temporary life, a temporary success, a temporary possession, a temporary body, and who insist on living in their eternal self here now while in the flesh. The way is always, God is right here. Acknowledging the presence of God is always the way, and it always works. In the acceptance of God's presence where you stand, the power of God manifests, revealing the false lures of matter and mortality, and we are free, liberated from our own self-ambitions, our own self-will, our own self-deception, our own fear, our own aches and pains. We are liberated from all false sense of love into the divine. Upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Mortality and matter, the harlot and the beast. I'd like to try and experiment as we go through the balance of this chapter. Try to not give your complete attention to what I'm saying. By that I mean, try to break your consciousness of being in a form while you're here. Be aware of the fact that there's more of you than just a form and a mind sitting here. Get back and break the circuit of the body consciousness. Now let's see how we go about that. There's an interesting sensation that can happen when you have broken that circuit of the senses. The world seems to be flowing by. You're not just standing still anymore. There's a movement within as if the whole world is slowly going by. Usually that's a sign to you that you have broken the circuit of the senses and you're in a different inner experience. You're being released to the infinite. Now there's a very important step I'd like you to take at this moment. Something that has never been taught. When you get into your car to go home, for example, you're going to possibly say, I am spirit. Now that's not enough. And so the other step is something like this. Now you know that when your automobile opens that garage automatically, it's because there's something inside the garage that is responding to something on your car. Something on your car is sending out a signal. Something in the garage is receiving the signal. So there's a positive sending and a negative receiving, so that positive and negative become one. The sender and the receiver become one. And that opens the door. If the gadget on your car wasn't sending, it wouldn't matter how well the gadget in the garage could receive, it would have nothing to receive. And if the gadget in the car were not working, it wouldn't matter how well your car was sending this signal, because there'd be no one to receive it. And so you see, there must be both, the sender and the receiver. And that's the secret of living in the Spirit. God the Infinite is your universal being. You must know it. You must be conscious that I am the infinite Spirit. You must know it. The infinite Spirit is everywhere, and it is I. But that's not enough. That's the sender, that's the transmitter. It is sending over all this earth its truth, its qualities, its allness are being transmitted. Where's the receiver? You are also the receiver. I am the infinite I am, and I am the individual I am. Right here is the individual I am, and the infinite I am, which is everywhere, is right here where I am. You've got it all there. Spirit is everywhere, and Spirit is here. Then you've got the receiver and the sender. And the sender is greater than the receiver. The Father is greater than the Son. But I, the receiver, the Son, am one with I, the Father, so that the infinite is pouring its fullness right here where I am, receiving it simply by accepting this truth in my consciousness. I and the Father are one. The infinite and the individual are one. Now, here. I can relax in that, for in that infinite oneness is my peace. There's nothing more for me to do but rest in that one realized. That infinite one, individualizing right here whereon I stand, is the I am that I am. There is no separation. There is no spirit and a material me. I am the infinite Spirit, individualized here as Spirit. Though the world does not know this, though the world does not see this, though the five senses cannot discern this, I am that infinite Spirit here, now. And all of the infinite is gracing my presence right here. Because there is no second, there is no other, there is no divided consciousness. The circuit is completed. The sender and the receiver are one, and I am both. God is all. God is the sender, God is the receiver. God is the Father, God is the Son. God is the positive, God is the negative. What difference, what words you use? The allness of God I am accepting as everywhere and here. Everywhere and here. If you leave out here, you've lost it. If you leave out everywhere, you've lost it. Everywhere and here. God is. And there is no other. Now with that consciousness, you can go anywhere. You can go in planes that fly upside down. You can get lost in the wilderness. You can be in complete dire poverty. It won't make any difference. That I will materialize as every need fulfilled. For when that I is acknowledged as the only presence, the infinite and the individual, without opposite, that I will manifest its presence as the allness of the Father made flesh. And there isn't anyone who cannot do this if they have a mind to, if they are taught it properly, and if they will dwell with it, rest in it, practice living in the infinite and the individual I, which is spirit, everywhere. So that having acknowledged infinite spirit, I cannot now look out and see forms and be impressed by them as powers, as realities. I acknowledge only the infinite spirit. I am not unfaithful to the infinite spirit. I am not deceived by formations of matter. I am not letting my false sense of consciousness deceive me into believing that the infinite spirit is not all that is here. And there is a turning within which breaks the circuit of the senses. And I discover I never had to get out of the body. I never could get out of the body. I never could overcome the body. I have always been the Spirit. I can never overcome that which is not here. Only the Spirit is here. I can never step out of a body, for the Spirit alone is here. Now I am seeing how false consciousness converts its sensation into an appearance called form. I am not in that sensation, in that appearance. I recognize it for what it is. An appearance made by the sensation of a false consciousness. But I am not in it. I am the Spirit. And the infinite Spirit is feeding itself where I stand, for it is I. All that the Father is doing everywhere, the Father is doing right here where I stand as the invisible Spirit. Wherever I walk in spiritual consciousness, I am under the government of that Spirit, and need fear not what mortal man can do, or mortal powers, or kings of the earth. For I am not accepting the false beliefs which are the abominations. I am in my identity. And in my identity, I can listen to these chapters and watch them and see them for what they are, deceivers of the world, leading men into a false body, destined to nothingness. Now we see these are the temptations that we have all succumbed to And as we learn not to succumb, we are freed. I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. The harlot was drunk with the blood of saints, meaning that even the saints had been tempted. Even the martyrs of Jesus had been tempted. Why, even Jesus had been tempted to believe in the reality of matter for a moment. And I wondered with great admiration, meaning how amazing that every person walking on the earth could have been fooled. And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman, and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath the 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast thou sawest was and is not. I'll repeat that. The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go unto perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is. You see, mortality and matter were, but they are not. They have never really existed except in the false consciousness. And so John is learning that the beast, or matter, was, but is not. And you must remember, he's seeing this in the wilderness, meaning in all of time. And in all of time he sees that there was a thing called matter, but at the end of time, matter is gone. It was only in time, only in space. But in reality it is not. It was in time and space, but in reality it is not. And that's the was and the is of matter, the beast. It never was, except in man's concepts. And John, in the high consciousness, can see the ultimate moment when that which never was is seen to be something that never was, and man is free of material belief, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. This is the emancipation from the belief in matter. They that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life. We who do not know identity are those whose names are not written in the book of life, because everyone is the Spirit. And those who have not recognized their spiritual identity shall wonder when they behold the beast that was, is, and yet not is. Here's the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. When Jesus was tempted by the devil, the belief in matter, the beast, he was brought to a mountain. And these are now become 7 mountains. In other words, there are 7 major temptations. They do not all occur simultaneously, because at one level you believe a certain way, at another you receive another temptation, and at other levels again more temptation. But always at different levels, different temptations. Those are the 7 mountains we all learn are not really there, but seem to be. the 7 initiations. And there are 7 kings, 5 have fallen. Now these 5 are those which we have overcome. One is, and the other is not yet come. Matter has not yet fallen, and the next temptation after matter has not yet come. When he cometh, he must continue a short space. Can't be avoided. We must go through the final initiation. And the beast that was, and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. So the 7 major temptations are all born, and all come out of the 8th, which is the belief in matter. And out of matter come, let us say, the 7 false beliefs. That I live in a material body. I live a material life. I have material organs. I live in space. I live in time. The life, the body, time, space, these are the beliefs that we accept. I was born, and from birth through to the grave, we are deceived by the 7 temptations of birth, life, body, possessions, time and space. All of it making a false existence, born of the one which is the combination of these 7, the belief in matter. And all destined to be temporary because it is not of God, only a changing image in the world mind. The 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings which have not received their kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. Now this 1 hour means that all of the material world, all of it, is but 1 hour in eternity. And we have accepted the 1 hour as reality instead of the eternity. We're told by that not to live in the 1 hour, but to stand outside of it in eternity, beholding, watching, not letting the temptations, the 10 kings, the 10 horns, the concentrated power of matter, fool us by their vast earthward hypnotism. All of the powers of the material earth and the material heavens concentrate as the 10 horns and the 10 kings to persuade us that we're still in bodies of clay. And these have one mind, and they shall give their power and strength unto the beast. The one mind, the one purpose of all of the powers of earth and heaven in matter are to deny that God is all. So vast is that hypnosis that we have accepted it. But these shall make war with the Lamb. The Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords, King of kings, and they that are with him are called, chosen and faithful. Now this is the voice of prophecy of John, lifted beyond mortality into the immortal self, witnessing that which is true, that which is real, that which is eternal, and he sees the Christ in you overcoming the belief in matter. The belief in matter, the belief in mortality makes war against the Lamb, but the Lamb shall overcome. living in the inner self, still within. We are receiving that woman who stood upon the sun and the moon, who is clothed in the sun. We are receiving inner revelation. Chapter 12 is coming through this to displace the harlot. We are being prepared to receive the divine word within, which releases us from the hypnotism of the senses, which releases us from slavery to matter, from a bondage that only exists in our false sense of things, but not in reality. All this John foresees in his illumined state. And he too is going through just that release. Isn't there a place where John tells us about this, about the love of the world? 1 John somewhere. Let's take a look. The first epistle of John had something along this line. He tells us, you remember, whoever loves the world is not of God, for nothing in the world is of God. Whosoever loveth the world is not of God, for nothing in the world is of God. That's taking in a lot of territory. That's the very self-same John who has received this revelation, that the world does not exist except in the false consciousness which believes in the material, mortal appearances of the world. He is teaching us how to step out of the plane before it hits the mountainside, how to live in eternity on the earth, even while appearing in a mortal material body to human sense. By rising to the purified consciousness of spirit. And then the Lamb shall overcome the beast. And he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the horse sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. He is telling us that the world, total world, is in bondage to that which is not. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Now it turns out that the powers which have power over us are false powers even to the beast. And there's a great secret in this. You might wince when you hear it. But we are learning to know evil so well that we can recognize it. And when we recognize it, know it for what it is, we will have no more of it. Maybe in our human sense of things we figure, well, that's a funny way to do things. But obviously that's the divine wisdom working. It says, before you can know the truth, you must know the lie. How will you recognize the truth if you can't recognize the lie? And so all of the evils we encounter, all of the mortal material nothingness that we experience, is to acquaint us with the lie so that we may seek, recognize, and cherish the truth. Some of us know the lie pretty well by now. So much so that we're willing to do anything to seek, find, and experience the truth, and this is the purpose. Remember, all of the evil exists only in false consciousness. It is never real. It is never permanent. It never touches identity. But by the contrast with it, you learn what is real and what is real power and what is true identity. And through this you can step out of the 1 hour, that fleeting moment of human existence, into the eternal for which you have been prepared to experience the life which is everlasting. Five of the temptations have fallen. One is now, and one is yet to come. The woman which thou sawest in that great city is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. The woman is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. Now the word city is used because that means state of consciousness. And the woman is a state of consciousness which rules even the kings of the earth. The state of consciousness, we know, is mortal materialism. And that is the ruling force of the state of this earth, from which Christ consciousness releases us. Now, Christ never was a physical form or in one. Christ is always your name. Christ is always your being, your identity, Son of God. The individualization of the infinite where you stand. Christ is that consciousness which is unconfined to a physical form, unresponsive to the physical forms around us, ever uncluttered, unattached, unclinging, free, needing nothing, seeking nothing, wanting nothing, because being Christ is all there is. And so we climb up to that dome where we can rest in Christ awareness. What do I need? Needs are only expressed by a false consciousness. What do I want? Wants are only expressed by a false consciousness. I am. God is now, here. So you see, when you are willing to rise above wanting, needing, seeking, knocking, waiting, hoping, becoming, and accept, now I am the Christ, now I am the Spirit, then the woman who sits upon the beast has been defeated. You are dehypnotized. You are not fooled into being less than the perfect child, living on the wisdom, the divine food, the truth, the love, the perfect presence of God where you are. You are literally then divine consciousness, not formed into a body of clay. And you are free to receive from that divine infinite consciousness where you are, letting it flow, letting it grace you, letting it live itself, not being concerned about the outer effects of the form, not how things are going to work out there, knowing that the divine consciousness is present, functioning perfectly where you are. Watch, behold, wait, be patient, be still, be trusting, accept. Don't let yourself be poured back into a form. Live in your consciousness, and then you are within, living the inner life, no longer bound by the externals. And you are reversing the whole order of the world, because the inner is the kingdom of God within you. And it does flow out into expression. It does change the outer effects. It does externalize as the good things. But the minute you step in there with a mind and try to say, I want this or that, or do this or that, or let me use you this way or that, you're out of divine consciousness. You have broken the perfect continuity by even a single stray human thought. Take no thought, be still, let, and behold, this divine consciousness flowing through and as you transforms your world into my kingdom. That is the glory of the Father within. Stay out of the form. Don't try to get out of the form. Recognize you're not in one. And watch that form perform the word of the Father through grace. Everything you do becomes radiant with invisible love. Everything you touch becomes animated by this divine spark that you let flow as your consciousness. Seek nothing. All that I have is thine. And in the not seeking, the not wanting, you are accepting I am. You are in the one. And the one becomes its own perfect manifestation wherever you are concerned. Now John foresaw that this is what you would do. The Lamb, the Christ realized in you as I am, would defeat every mental, mortal, material temptation, so that you would insist on the purity of spiritual living. And this is how we step out of the abominations, the false sense of life, the ups and downs, the good and the bad, the opposites. And we now walk under divine law, because our consciousness is the divine consciousness governing us. There are not two consciousnesses. The false one, the shadow, is no more. As friend to friend, let me say this. Until you develop that desire in you to sit still frequently, to practice that you are not in a body of clay, that you are spirit, that divine consciousness is governing you, and then to feel the experience of it again and again and again until you are sure that this is the truth, Until you do this, you will continue to have your ups and your downs. When you do this, you will notice the difference, usually very quickly. We must come to a place where we are not caught in mortal forms. Where when someone knocks on your door, they don't find a mortal form behind that door, opening it and saying hello. When the phone rings, they don't speak to a mortal person. You must not be caught in a mortal form. You must learn how to live in divine consciousness. And that mortal form that appears will live under the law of divine consciousness. You will find your name written in the book of life from the foundation of the world. Now, I know what I'm telling you is difficult. I can assure you I'm not a master of it. But I also know that as I work on it, it gives, it yields, it opens. And I know it can be done because I witness it not only in myself but in a few others who are able not to be caught in a mortal form. They're the ones who can walk on the plane and bless every occupant of that plane, every occupant of that automobile, every occupant of that business, every occupant of that room. They are not in mortal forms consciously. And that brings divine law where they are. Be that one. That is walking with God. Well, we have about 5 more weeks, I think, to graduation. And so, on your way home today, infinite spirit is everywhere, and infinite spirit is where you are. Let the two become one in your consciousness and watch how beautiful it is. See you soon. Thank you.